$2. That's all I have. Wendy Anderson's whisper barely reached the bakery clerk, whose face crumpled with pity she couldn't quite hide. Outside, snow fell thick and fast on the December street. Each flake a tiny frozen reminder of how cold the world could be. Inside the warm bakery, Wendy sat motionless in her silver wheelchair, staring up at the birthday cakes glowing behind the glass like promises she couldn't afford to keep. 24 years old today, and these two crumpled dollar bills, earned through weeks of sacrifice, couldn't even buy the smallest celebration. Then the door burst open with a gust of winter wind and sudden laughter, and a tall man in an expensive charcoal coat entered with a little girl whose bright eyes would see past every wall Wendy had built, changing everything in ways none of them could possibly imagine. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, let's get into it. But before that door could change her life, Wendy needed to understand how she'd arrived at this moment, how a girl who once flew across stages had ended up counting dollars in a bakery. 3 years ago, a winter night much like this one, though colder, the kind of cold that made your bones ache. Wendy was walking home from a late rehearsal at the academy, her dance bag slung over her shoulder, still moving with that unconscious grace that came from years of training. Even her walk was choreographed, weight shifting from heel to toe, hips aligned, shoulders back. Dance wasn't something she did. It was who she was. The city street was mostly empty at this hour, just a few cars passing under streetlights that reflected off patches of ice like scattered diamonds. Her breath came out in visible puffs, and she was replaying the choreography from that night's session in her mind, counting beats, imagining the music. 5, 6, 7, 8. She'd finally nailed the sequence that had been eluding her for weeks. Then she heard the sound. The motorcycle engine screaming. Too loud, too fast. The pitch rising like a warning siren. She turned. Dancer's reflexes making her body respond before her brain fully processed the danger. The motorcycle was sliding sideways on black ice, sparks flying from metal scraping asphalt. Time stretched and slowed, giving her enough time to see everything with terrible clarity while giving her no time at all to escape. The motorcycle hit a parked car with a sound like the world splitting open. The car lurched forward with impossible force, tires squealing, momentum carrying it toward her. Wendy stood frozen, her dancer's body suddenly useless, reflexes that had been trained to leap and spin now paralyzed by fear. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch as the car kept coming, kept sliding, kept closing the distance until there was no distance left. Metal crushed against brick with a sound that would haunt her forever. The car pinned her against the building, and she tried to scream, but the sound cut off mid-breath, swallowed by shock and pain. She felt the cold pavement beneath her, wetness spreading, blood or snow, she couldn't tell, and then numbness started spreading from her legs upward like frost creeping across a window. I can't feel my legs, she thought, and that was worse than the pain. Can't move them, can't feel them, can't. She tried to move them, willed her legs to kick, to do anything. Nothing. Just numbness and sirens growing closer, and the darkness rising up like a tide, pulling her under. 5 days lost to darkness. Wendy woke to fluorescent lights that burned her eyes and the smell of antiseptic and something else. Defeat, maybe, or despair. Aunt Margaret's face hovered above her, and she looked older somehow, grayer. Lines carved deeper into her forehead. Wendy tried to sit up. Couldn't. Tried to move her legs. Nothing. Panic rose in her throat like bile, sharp and acidic. Her hands flew to her legs, touching them, but it was like touching someone else's body. Present, but not hers. There, but not responsive. The doctor entered with the kind of clinical detachment that doctors develop as armor against other people's pain. His words came out like a judge delivering a sentence. Complete spinal cord injury. Permanent. You'll never walk again. Those words rewrote her entire future in the space between heartbeats. Everything she was. Everything she'd worked for. Everything she'd planned. Erased. The stages she would never dance on. The tours she would never take. The girl she would never become. Margaret's hand found hers then, the first and only time her aunt had ever reached for her that way. They sat in silence, tears running down both their faces, neither of them acknowledging what they both understood. Wendy's life, as she'd known it, was over. 8 months after the accident, Margaret had a stroke. Wendy found her collapsed in the kitchen, still wearing her apron, a half-mixed bowl of cake batter on the counter. It had been Wendy's birthday. She called 911, waited helplessly while the paramedics worked, then followed the ambulance to the hospital in her wheelchair, that place she'd hoped never to see again. Margaret never woke from the coma. She died 3 days later without goodbyes, without last words, without anything but the mechanical beeping of machines marking the end of a life lived hard, and without softness. Wendy attended the funeral in her new wheelchair, now orphaned twice over. Her inheritance, Margaret's medical debt, a studio apartment with an elevator that broke more than it worked, and a disability check that barely covered rent. The universe had systematically stripped away every support, every comfort, every person who remembered that Wendy was more than the girl in the wheelchair. The timing felt like a cruel cosmic joke. The dance academy sent flowers, once. A massive arrangement with a card signed by everyone and read by no one. Friends visited twice, their discomfort radiating from them like heat. They brought magazines about dance, the worst gift possible, full of bodies doing things hers never would again. Their eyes held pity mixed with relief that this tragedy had happened to someone else. Conversations died in awkward silences. "I'll come back soon," they promised. None of them did. Phone calls became texts, became nothing. At 24, Wendy was socially dead. She existed now in a studio apartment where mice scratched in the walls and the radiator clanged like ghosts. The building housed society's forgotten ones, elderly people on fixed incomes, disabled veterans with haunted eyes, single mothers working 3 jobs. Her disability check barely covered rent. She taught online ballet theory to students who complained about her depressing teaching style and canceled without notice or apology. The laptop screen had become a barrier between her and the world she could no longer inhabit. She'd sold everything. Her costumes went to a costume shop for pennies on the dollar. Trophies were melted down for scrap metal. Competition medals disappeared into pawn shops. Her dance shoes she'd given away. She couldn't bear to sell them, couldn't bear to see someone put a price on her dreams. Margaret's wedding ring went last, and selling it felt like betrayal, like erasing the only person who'd ever cared. The money all went to physical therapy that promised hope and delivered only disappointment. Each session brought pain and effort, and no improvement. The therapist finally admitted with brutal honesty, "This is as good as it gets." Medical bills stacked like accusations. Her credit was ruined, her future mortgaged, her past sold piece by piece. For 3 weeks, she'd saved for this moment, for her birthday. Every spare coin, every dollar she could scrape together. She skipped meals. Dancer's discipline applied to a different purpose now. She rolled past the coffee shop where warmth and normalcy taunted her. Margaret's birthday tradition haunted her. The simple homemade cake, the off-key singing, that acknowledgement that said you matter without needing words. This year, she'd decided to create her own celebration. $2 saved. $6 needed. The math didn't work, had never worked, would never work. But dignity forced her to try anyway. And so she sat at the bakery counter, those 2 crumpled bills in her trembling hand, staring at the smallest cake in the display that might as well have cost $1 million. The clerk looked away, embarrassed to witness this moment of poverty laid bare. Then the door chimed. Winter air rushed in, sharp and cold, carrying laughter and the sound of a child's voice and possibility that Wendy didn't know how to recognize anymore. She didn't turn around, didn't look up, didn't let herself hope. But everything was about to shift, whether she was ready for it or not. The man who walked through the falling snow toward the bakery that evening stood 6'2", with the kind of presence that made people instinctively move aside in crowded rooms. His navy cashmere coat probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and his Italian leather shoes left perfect impressions in the fresh snow. The watch on his wrist, a Patek Philippe, subtle enough that only those who knew would recognize it, could have fed a family for a year. But it was his eyes that told the real story, eyes that carried the weight of someone who understood that all the money in the world couldn't buy back what mattered most. Jeffrey Rogers was worth $4.3 billion, though he'd stopped counting after the first billion when the numbers became abstract and meaningless. Rogers' biotech was his empire, his legacy, the thing that consumed 70-hour work weeks and gave him purpose, when purpose felt impossible to find. The company specialized in regenerative medicine and neural research, cutting-edge work that saved lives, restored hope, pushed the boundaries of what science could accomplish. The irony wasn't lost on him. He could fund research that might one day help paralyzed people walk again, that might prevent brain injuries, that might cure diseases thought incurable. But he hadn't been able to save the one person who mattered most. The media called him many things: genius, visionary, the most eligible bachelor in tech. That last one made him want to throw something every time he saw it in a headline. At home, he was simply daddy to his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. That was the title he actually wanted, the only one that mattered. Everything else, the billions, the company, the awards, the magazine covers, was just noise. 2 years ago, his wife Sarah had started getting headaches. Nothing dramatic, just persistent pressure behind her eyes that Advil couldn't touch. The doctor had recommended a procedure. Simple, low risk, outpatient, he'd said, with the confidence of someone who performed a dozen of these every week. She'll be home by dinner. Jeffrey had sat in the waiting room with 5-year-old Lily beside him, her small hands moving crayons across a princess coloring book Sarah had bought her that morning. Hours passed. The receptionist kept saying, "Any minute now," with a smile that became increasingly strained. Then the doctor emerged, and Jeffrey knew before the man opened his mouth, knew from the way his shoulders sagged, knew from the careful blankness he'd arranged on his face. Complications, the doctor said, and that single word ended Jeffrey's world. Unexpected bleeding. They couldn't stop it. Did everything they could. Sarah never woke from the anesthesia. The words came at him like punches, each one landing harder than the last. His world was collapsing, but Lily was tugging at his sleeve, asking, "Daddy, what's wrong?"
"Where's Mommy?" And he had to hold himself together while everything inside him shattered into pieces too small to ever reassemble. They let him sit with her in the hospital room, machines beeping their meaningless rhythms, Sarah's hand still warm in his, but already feeling different somehow, already feeling like goodbye. The doctors explained about brain death, about decisions that needed to be made, and Jeffrey held Lily on his lap while they talked about letting Sarah go, trying to shield his daughter from words like terminate and organ donation and time of death. "Is Mommy sleeping?" Lily asked, her small fingers touching Sarah's hand. "Yes, sweetheart," Jeffrey lied, the words like glass in his throat. "Forever sleeping." The truth. She's gone. She's never coming back. Our life as we knew it is over. He couldn't speak yet. Maybe would never be able to speak. So he held his daughter and said goodbye to his wife and made decisions that felt impossible. And when they finally left the hospital, Lily asked if Mommy would be awake when they got home. And Jeffrey realized that explaining death to a 5-year-old might be harder than surviving it himself. The house became a minefield of memories. Sarah's perfume still lingered on her pillow. He kept that pillow unchanged for months, sometimes pressing his face into it just to remember what she smelled like. Photos covered every surface, and eventually he turned most of them face down, because seeing her smile was like being stabbed repeatedly in the same wound. Lily asked questions he couldn't answer. "Why doesn't Mommy come back? Will you die too? Did I make Mommy sick?" He navigated fatherhood alone, drowning in deep water with no shore in sight. Board meetings by day, nightmare comfort by night. Quarterly reports and tears on his shoulder. Business decisions. And, "Daddy, I miss Mommy," whispered in the dark. A grief counselor taught him to meet people where they are, to crouch down to Lily's level, to make eye contact, to be present even when presence felt impossible. He learned. He tried. Some days he even succeeded, but the loneliness was crushing. He was surrounded by people constantly, board members, researchers, assistants, executives, all of them wanting something. His money, his time, his signature, his influence. No one asked how he actually was. No one wanted to know about the hole in his chest that Sarah's death had left, about the way he still reached for her in bed, only to find cold sheets, about the sound of Lily crying for her mother in the night. Most eligible bachelor, the magazines called him, and he hated that title with a passion that sometimes frightened him. He didn't want to be eligible. He wanted to be left alone with his daughter and his grief and the simple task of surviving each day. But then there was Lily, 7 years old now, with her mother's auburn hair and green eyes exactly like Sarah's, beautiful and painful every time he looked at her. She had her mother's compassion too, her curiosity, her light. Today, she'd earned a perfect score on her first-grade spelling test, and he'd promised her any treat she wanted. Her excitement was pure, uncomplicated by the grief he carried like stones in his pockets. She noticed sad people and tried to help them. Her friend Marcus used a wheelchair, and Lily had once asked him, with the blunt honesty of childhood, "Does it go fast?" She saw the person, not the disability, and Jeffrey wondered how long it would take the world to teach her to see differently. Her artwork covered his office walls, crayon drawings of princesses and ponies, and the three of them as stick figures holding hands. Board members found glitter in quarterly reports and smiled about it instead of complaining. At parent-teacher conferences, he learned that Lily shared her lunch with kids who forgot theirs, that she helped a classmate who spoke no English, that she'd asked her teacher why the school wasn't wheelchair accessible. She was becoming a remarkable human being, despite, or maybe because of, the tragedy that had shaped her early years. And that terrified him. What if something happened to him? Who would love her the way he did? Who would remember that she liked her sandwiches cut diagonally and wouldn't eat anything green except peas? Who would understand that she needed 3 stories before bed and still sometimes cried for her mother in the dark? He was overprotective. He knew that. Tried to let her be a child, while keeping her safe from a world that had already taken so much. It was a balance he'd never quite mastered, walking the line between safety and freedom, between protecting her from pain and preparing her for a life that held no guarantees. But every day he made the choice to keep living for her. She was his son, his purpose, his reason for getting out of bed when some mornings felt impossible. Today was simple, a father-daughter outing to celebrate her spelling test success. Lily had chosen the bakery, the one with the good cakes, Daddy. You know which one. And so here they were, driving through snow, while she chattered about school and friends and everything and nothing. He half listened, mostly just grateful for the sound of her voice, for this moment of ordinary happiness. He helped her from the car, her pink winter coat buttoned up to her chin, pink hat pulled low over her ears. Sarah had bought her that coat last winter, before the headache started. He tried not to think about that. Lily's small hand in his felt like his anchor to the world. This was his everything. Not the billions in the bank, not the company that bore his name, not the legacy he was building. Just this. Walking through snow with his daughter, her mittened hand in his, her voice bright with excitement about cake and candles and sprinkles. He opened the bakery door, warmth washing over them, the smell of sugar and vanilla and promise. Lily gasped at the display case and immediately ran toward it, her boots leaving wet prints on the floor. Jeffrey followed, smiling at her enthusiasm, his eyes still adjusting to the warm light after the darkness outside. He didn't see the young woman in the wheelchair yet. Didn't notice her sitting frozen at the counter with 2 crumpled dollar bills in her hand. Didn't know that 3 lives were about to intersect in this small bakery on a snowy evening. That fate had been arranging this moment for years. That everything was about to change. But the door had closed behind them. The bell had finished its cheerful chime, and somewhere in the warm bakery air, possibility was taking shape. Lily skipped ahead of her father, her pink coat dusted with fresh snow that hadn't yet melted, and immediately pressed her face to the display case glass. Her breath fogged the surface, small hands leaving prints as she pointed at each cake with growing excitement. "Daddy, look! That one has sprinkles and those little silver balls." She bounced on her toes, her ponytail swinging. "Can we get the big one? The really big one?" Jeffrey smiled, starting to say, "Let's see what—" But Lily's attention had already shifted mid-sentence. She'd noticed the young woman in the wheelchair by the counter, and with the unfiltered interest of childhood that knew nothing of awkwardness or pity, she walked directly toward her. "Hi, is that your chair?" Wendy stiffened, her shoulders going rigid, bracing for the discomfort or pity that always followed questions like these. But Lily was already continuing with pure, uncomplicated curiosity. "My friend, Marcus has one, but his is black. Yours is silver. That's really pretty." Jeffrey moved to intervene gently. "Lily, sweetheart." But Wendy surprised herself by smiling, something loosening in her chest at the child's directness.
"Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "I think silver is pretty, too."
Lily tilted her head, studying the wheelchair with genuine interest. "Does it go fast? Can you do wheelies? Do you have a motor, or is it like Marcus's?" "Lily, maybe," Jeffrey began, mildly embarrassed, but Wendy found herself almost laughing. The sound rusty, but real. "It's okay. No motor, just my arms. And I've never tried wheelies." Lily's response was completely serious. "You should try. Marcus does them at recess." As if this solved everything. As if wheelies were the obvious next step. The refreshing honesty of it. No pity in those green eyes, no awkwardness, just curiosity and complete acceptance, made something in Wendy's chest feel less tight for the first time in months. "Are you buying a birthday cake?" Lily asked next, gesturing at the display case. Wendy hesitated, feeling the weight of those 2 crumpled bills in her hand. "It's not my birthday. I'm just here for spelling." Lily's face lit up with pride. "I got 100% on my test." Then, more thoughtfully, "But birthdays are more important than spelling." Wendy's eyes prickled with sudden tears she had to blink back. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely steady. "Today's my birthday." "How old?" 24. Lily's eyes went wide. "That's really old. Like, almost as old as Daddy." "I'm 35, Lily," Jeffrey interjected. "See? Really old." Despite everything, the poverty, the isolation, the crushing weight of this day, Wendy found herself laughing. Actually, laughing. "Are you getting a cake?" Lily asked, and the silence that followed felt heavy. Wendy's hand tightened on the crumpled bills, and that's when Jeffrey really saw it. Saw the $2 she was clutching like they were everything. Saw the way she held herself with dignity, despite the tremor in her jaw. Saw the look in her eyes, a look he recognized instantly because he'd seen it in his own mirror during those first months after Sarah died. Someone drowning, but too proud to scream for help. Someone holding on by their fingernails to the last shreds of dignity. Someone who understood what it meant to lose everything that mattered. Understanding flooded through him, sharp and immediate. Jeffrey crouched down, meeting Wendy at eye level, something his grief counselor had taught him about meeting people where they are, about making connection instead of talking down to someone. "Actually," he said, his voice gentle, "we were about to celebrate Lily's achievement." He paused, holding Wendy's gaze, but birthdays definitely trump spelling tests. "Would you join us?" "It seems wrong to celebrate alone." Wendy's immediate instinct was to refuse, to protect herself from pity, from the inevitable disappointment when this kindness evaporated like morning mist from charity that would feel like condescension. But before she could form the words, Lily had already grabbed her hand. "Yes, you have to." Lily's enthusiasm was unstoppable, her words tumbling out in a rush. "We can get a cake with 24 candles. You can tell me what it's like to be old. And Daddy can buy it because he buys everything." This last part was said without guile, just stating facts as she understood them. Jeffrey looked slightly embarrassed. "Lily, I don't buy everything. You bought me a pony. That was one time. And a treehouse. Every kid should have. And that robot that makes breakfast." Jeffrey sighed, a smile tugging at his lips despite himself. "Okay, I buy some things." Wendy found herself laughing again, that sound she hadn't heard from herself in months, maybe years. "A pony?" she asked, genuinely amused despite everything. "A small pony," Jeffrey clarified with mock seriousness, More of a large dog, really. Her name is Buttercup, and she's perfect, Lily corrected firmly. The absurdity of it, talking about ponies and robots while sitting in a bakery with $2 to her name, broke through Wendy's defenses like sunlight through storm clouds. Jeffrey's eyes were kind, but not pitying. Direct, but not invasive. He was looking at her, not at the wheelchair, not at her poverty, just at her. "Please," he said simply. "Lily's right. It would be nice to have company." Wendy looked between them. This man who seemed genuinely kind, whose eyes held their own grief. This girl who saw her as a person, not a wheelchair, not a tragedy, not an object of pity. Her own loneliness was screaming yes, drowning out every defense she'd carefully constructed. "Okay," she heard herself say, the word coming out before she could stop it. "Yes, thank you." The bakery clerk, who had been watching this entire exchange with tears gathering in her eyes, moved quickly to help them arrange seating. A cake was selected, chocolate with exactly 24 candles. The three of them moved to a small table in the corner, Wendy's wheelchair fitting naturally into the space, as if it had always been meant to be there. Lily chattered about everything and nothing, school and friend and Buttercup, and the treehouse and why carrots were orange, but she wished they were purple. Jeffrey quietly arranged the candles with careful precision, occasionally meeting Wendy's eyes with a small smile that said, "I know, she's a lot, but isn't she wonderful?" Snow continued falling outside, blanketing the world in white. Inside, warmth was building, not just from the bakery's heat, but from something else, something none of them could name yet. Something was shifting in the air between them, settling into place like puzzle pieces that had been searching for each other without knowing it. None of them named it, not yet, but they all felt it. The beginning of something that would change everything. The small table in the corner felt like its own world, separate from everything else. The chocolate cake sat between them like a centerpiece at a wedding. 24 candles glowing with small flames that reflected in Wendy's eyes and made them look, for the first time in years, like they held light instead of shadows. The bakery clerk watched from behind the counter, dabbing at her eyes with her apron. Other customers glanced over occasionally, smiling at the scene. A father, his daughter, and a young woman in a wheelchair sharing cake on a snowy evening. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, blanketing the street in white silence. Inside, they existed in a cocoon of warmth and light. Wendy's wheelchair was positioned naturally at the table, not awkwardly, not accommodated with that careful arrangement that always made her feel like an afterthought. Just belonging, like the space had been waiting for her all along. Lily sat across from her, already talking a mile a minute. Jeffrey sat to the side, watching both of them with an expression that was equal parts wonder and gratitude. The candlelight caught Wendy's blonde hair and turned it almost golden. It caught Lily's animated expressions as she gestured wildly while talking about something to do with purple carrots. It caught Jeffrey's soft smile, the first genuine one he'd worn in months, maybe years. The moment felt suspended in time, held in amber. The world outside was irrelevant. Just this. 3 people, 1 table, 1 cake. The simplicity of it was profound in a way that made Wendy's chest ache. "So you were a dancer?" Lily asked, her eyes going wide with fascination. "Like in the movies? With the spinny things?" Wendy hesitated, the old familiar pain rising up. But something about Lily's genuine curiosity, her complete lack of pity or awkwardness, made the words come easier than they had in years. "Yes," she said. "I was a dancer." "What did it feel like?" Wendy paused, searching for words that could capture something that had once been her entire existence. "Like flying without leaving the ground," she said finally. "Like the music moved through you, not just around you. Like being the most yourself you could ever be." Lily listened with rapt, serious attention. No interruptions, complete focus. The kind of listening that made you feel heard down to your bones. "Were you scared on stage?" she asked. "Sometimes, but in a good way." "Did your feet hurt?" "All the time," Wendy admitted with a small smile. "Dancers' feet are pretty ugly." "What was your favorite dance?" Wendy answered each question, finding that she could talk about dance without drowning in grief for the first time since the accident. The memories came, but they didn't pull her under. They just were. "I wish I could have seen you dance," Lily said finally, her voice solemn. "Me too," Wendy whispered. But she said it without breaking, without the tears that usually came when she thought about what she'd lost. "Mommy liked dancing too," Lily said suddenly, looking at her father. Jeffrey's expression softened. "She did. She was terrible at it." He said it with such love that it made them all smile. "But she danced anyway, in the kitchen usually." "She danced to everything," Lily added. "Even commercials." They were talking about loss without drowning in it. Grief present, but not consuming. Wendy understood something in that moment. They knew loss too. They understood what it meant to survive tragedy. This wasn't pity. This was recognition. "Mommy's in heaven, but she's still my mommy," Lily said with the simple certainty of a child. Then she looked at Wendy. "And you're still a dancer even if you can't dance. Because it's who you are, not what you do." 7-year-old wisdom delivered like a proclamation. Wendy felt tears gathering but found herself smiling through them. Jeffrey's hand briefly touched Lily's head, and the pride in his face was unmistakable. The clerk dimmed the bakery lights slightly, making the moment more special. Lily wiggled in her seat with barely contained excitement. "Ready? Ready?" Jeffrey started the song, and Wendy was surprised by his voice. Rich, surprisingly beautiful, almost trained. Lily joined in immediately, loud and off-key and enthusiastic and absolutely perfect. Then other customers in the bakery began joining in, strangers singing to a stranger, and Wendy closed her eyes against the sudden swell of emotion. She made a wish. Not to walk again. She was learning, slowly, to let that go. Not for money, which couldn't fix what was broken inside her. Just to matter today. Just to be seen by someone. Just to not be alone. The simplicity of that wish. The heartbreak of needing to wish for it at all. She opened her eyes as the song ended. Jeffrey was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Recognition? Understanding? Something more? His eyes held hers, and the moment stretched between them like a thread. "Make a wish! Make a wish!" Lily insisted. Wendy leaned forward and blew out all 24 candles in one breath. Smoke curled up toward the ceiling. Lily clapped enthusiastically. "What did you wish for?" Wendy smiled. "Can't tell, or it won't come true." Lily accepted this wisdom solemnly, nodding with the seriousness of someone who understood the rules of birthday wishes. The clerk cut the cake and served 3 slices. Wendy took her first bite, and the chocolate melted on her tongue like hope made tangible. When was the last time she'd had birthday cake? 3 years ago? Margaret's final birthday,
before everything fell apart? This tasted like possibility. Lily talked with her mouth full, about school, about Buttercup the pony, about her teacher, about everything and nothing. Her chatter filled the comfortable silence. Jeffrey interjected occasionally with gentle corrections or additions. Wendy just listened, participating, feeling part of something for the first time in so long. Not an outsider looking in, not a charity case being accommodated, just a person at a table, an equal participant. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jeffrey looked up from arranging napkins. "For what?" "For this, you didn't have to." His response was unexpected. Actually, he reached for his wallet, pulling out a business card. "I did have to." He placed the card on the table between them. Elegant, simple white cardstock with black lettering. Jeffrey Rogers, CEO, Rogers Biotech. Wendy stared at it, not understanding. Jeffrey started to explain, and the world tilted slightly on its axis. Everything was about to shift again. From birthday cake to something she couldn't yet name. Her life transforming one moment at a time, whether she was ready for it or not. The business card lay on the table between them like a bridge between two worlds. Elegant design, embossed letters on quality cardstock that felt expensive even from a distance. Jeffrey Rogers, CEO, Rogers Biotech. Below that, in smaller type, regenerative medicine and neural research. Wendy stared at it, not understanding what it had to do with her, with this moment, with birthday cake and kindness from strangers. "My company specializes in neural regeneration research," Jeffrey began, his voice careful. "Spinal cord injuries, brain trauma, neural pathways. We're trying to find ways to help people like you." And there it was, the catch. Wendy's guard shot up so fast it was almost audible, her shoulders going rigid. This was pity after all. A charity case. Another false hope. Another disappointment waiting to happen. She should have known better than to let herself believe in kindness without strings attached. "I see," she said, her voice carefully neutral, polite distance rebuilding the walls Lily had so easily dismantled. Jeffrey noticed the shift immediately. He leaned forward slightly, continuing with even more care. "We're looking for patient advocates, people who understand the community, who can help us design programs that actually help, rather than just look good on paper." He paused, seeming to choose his next words deliberately. "This might sound forward, but would you consider consulting with us? The pay is substantial." That last part he said almost reluctantly, as if the money was the least important aspect of what he was offering. Wendy looked from the card to his face, searching for the catch she knew had to be there. Years of disappointment had taught her that every hope extended was eventually snatched away. Why would this be different? Where? One word. But it carried everything. Suspicion, self-protection, years of being let down, fear of being someone's charity project. Jeffrey didn't look offended. He actually seemed to have expected the question. He leaned forward, intent, meeting her eyes directly. "I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you." The directness of it caught her off guard. "I'm offering because in the 5 minutes we've talked, you've shown more genuine insight into living with disability than our entire advisory board has in 6 months." Wendy started to protest. But Jeffrey continued, listing specifics she hadn't even realized she'd shared. How she'd described dignity versus pity in her exchange with Lily. Her unspoken commentary on accessibility, just in the way she'd positioned her wheelchair at the table. Her perspective on being seen as a person versus being helped as a problem. The way she'd talked about dance as identity
not just ability. You said things our team needs to hear, he finished. Perspectives we're missing, voices that aren't in the room. Wendy still felt uncertain, the ground beneath her unsteady. But you just met me. You don't know anything about me. Jeffrey's response was immediate. I know you scraped together $2 for a birthday cake. I know you'd rather have dignity than pity. I know you're a survivor. He paused, a small smile crossing his face. I know my daughter likes you, and Lily's judgment is usually sound. I really like her, Lily confirmed through a mouthful of cake, not helping the subtlety, but adding undeniable enthusiasm. Jeffrey explained the role more fully. Consultant position, reviewing accessibility initiatives, providing feedback on program design, patient advocacy, potentially speaking at conferences, helping shape the direction of research itself. We have doctors, scientists, researchers, he said, but we don't have lived experience. We don't have your perspective. Then he mentioned the salary range. The number made Wendy's heart stop. It was more in a month than she made in a year, more than she'd made in 2 years. This is a real job, Jeffrey emphasized, as if reading her thoughts. Not charity, not pity. We need what you know, what you've lived, what you understand that we don't. Wendy looked down at the card in her hand, her mind racing through all the reasons to say no. Too good to be true. It always was. She'd fail. She'd failed before. She'd disappoint them. She disappointed everyone eventually. It was probably pity disguised as opportunity. They'd realize she wasn't qualified. She didn't have a degree in medicine or research or anything relevant. Just lived experience and broken dreams. But something in Jeffrey's face stopped her. Something in Lily's expectant expression. The memory of Margaret's words echoed in her head. Don't get cocky. Don't assume you deserve it. But also, you matter. You have value. This wasn't cocky. This was possibility. This was a chance to matter again. Not despite her disability, but because of her experience with it. Her expertise wasn't invalid. It was just different. I don't have a degree in medicine or research, she said finally. We have dozens of people with those degrees, Jeffrey replied. We don't have someone who lives this reality. Wendy took a breath. Yes, I'll do it. Jeffrey's smile was genuine pleasure, not condescension. He pulled out his phone to note her contact information. Wendy provided her email and phone number with hands that shook slightly. Can I have another slice of cake? Lily asked, making them all laugh, the tension breaking like a fever. The conversation shifted to practical details. Start date. Monday, if she was available. Meeting with the team. Office location. He made a point of mentioning it was a fully accessible building. Accommodation needs. Transportation arrangements. Assistive technology requirements. Schedule flexibility. His questions were thoughtful, treating her as a professional, respecting her needs, without making them the defining feature of who she was. Time passed, without anyone noticing. Snow still fell outside, but inside there was warmth and promise and possibility hanging in the air like the smell of chocolate cake. Eventually, it was time for them to leave. Lily didn't want to go. Can Wendy come home with us? She asked. Jeffrey was gentle but firm. Not tonight, sweetheart, but we'll see her Monday. Lily seemed satisfied with this promise. She threw her arms around Wendy in a fierce hug that nearly knocked her sideways. Happy birthday, Wendy, she whispered. I'm so glad we came here today. So am I, Wendy whispered back, meaning it with every fiber of her being. As they gathered their coats and headed for the door, Jeffrey looked back one more time. Monday, 9 a.m.? Wendy nodded, the business card already tucked safely in her pocket. Her life was already shifting, changing, transforming. Not rescued, but offered opportunity. Not saved, but seen. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself believe that tomorrow might actually be different. Jeffrey and Lily stood to leave, gathering coats and scarves. Lily threw herself at Wendy one more time, her hug fierce and enthusiastic. "Happy birthday, Wendy! I'm so glad we came here today." "So am I," Wendy said, and she meant it completely, felt it deeply in a way she hadn't felt anything in years. Jeffrey's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a touch that was warm and steady and somehow grounding. "See you Monday, 9 a.m.? Wendy nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched them leave, the door opening to let in a rush of snow and cold air. They disappeared into the winter evening, two silhouettes against the white. Jeffrey looked back through the window one last time, catching her eye. A small wave. Then they were gone, swallowed by the snow and the darkness and the distance. Wendy sat at the table for a long moment, staring at the business card in her hand. It felt like holding a winning lottery ticket, but not because of the money, because of what it represented. A chance to matter again, an opportunity to contribute, being seen as capable instead of broken, purpose beyond mere survival. The clerk approached, her voice thick with emotion. "That was beautiful." "You didn't charge me," Wendy realized suddenly. He paid for everything, plus a very generous tip. The clerk smiled through tears, said it was your birthday, and birthdays should be celebrated. Wendy nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The clerk helped her to the door. "Good luck Monday. Something tells me this is the start of something wonderful." Wendy rolled home through the snow, the business card safe in her pocket, something unfamiliar and fragile blooming in her chest. Hope, maybe. Possibility. Her apartment seemed less cold somehow when she got home, not because the temperature had changed, but because tomorrow had changed. She looked at the card under the dim apartment light, studying every detail, the embossed letters, the phone number, the address. She allowed herself to hope, just a little. That night, for the first time in months, she slept peacefully, and her dreams were not of loss, but of possibility. Wendy woke before her alarm, actually excited to get up. When had that last happened? She chose her outfit carefully, professional but comfortable, accessible but stylish. She wanted to be taken seriously. Rogers Biotech headquarters was gleaming and modern and impressive. But the first thing Wendy noticed wasn't the glass and steel or the expensive art in the lobby. It was the ramps, integrated into the design, not tacked on as an afterthought. Wide automatic doors, accessible bathroom signs clearly visible, elevator buttons at the appropriate height, design that included rather than merely accommodated. The reception desk was at her level. The receptionist greeted her by name. "Miss Anderson, Mr. Rogers is expecting you." She was escorted to a conference room where the team was assembled. Researchers in lab coats, doctors with impressive credentials, administrators with tablets and serious expressions. They all looked at her with curiosity, some with skepticism. Who was this consultant? What could she possibly know that they didn't? Then Jeffrey entered, and the room's energy shifted. He commanded attention without demanding it. "Everyone, this is Wendy Anderson, our new patient advocacy consultant.
His voice was firm, professional. She brings lived experience our research desperately needs. He was establishing her authority, making it clear she wasn't a charity hire. She was essential. Wendy's heart pounded. Her hands shook. But she found her voice. "I'm not here to teach you medicine," she began. "You know far more about that than I ever will. I'm here to tell you what it's actually like." She told them about the accident, briefly, about the aftermath, honestly, about daily realities they'd never considered. Broken elevators that meant being trapped in her apartment for days. Buildings labeled accessible that absolutely weren't. Medical equipment that cost thousands and wasn't covered by insurance. Physical pain that was a constant companion. The emotional toll of lost independence, social isolation, and abandonment. The impossibly thin line between dignity and pity, being seen as a wheelchair first and a person second. The room went silent. They were actually listening. One researcher finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. "We never considered that. Our accessibility standards are based on minimum legal requirements, not actual usability." Another added, "We design for patients, but we don't include them in the design process." The discussion opened up. Questions came rapid fire, showing they were thinking differently. How could we improve this? What would actually help? Why doesn't this work in practice? Wendy answered each one, drawing on 3 years of lived experience. Her expertise wasn't medical, but it was valid. It was necessary. And they were finally realizing that. The cafeteria was fully accessible. Wendy noted this with quiet satisfaction. She sat across from Jeffrey, who asked, "How do you think it went?" "Terrifying," she admitted. "But good?" His smile was genuine. "You were brilliant. Half the team is already redesigning projects based on your feedback." They discussed ideas, him asking follow-up questions, building on her thoughts. He treated her as an equal. No pity, no awkwardness, just professional respect. And something more. Something neither of them was naming yet. The way he listened with complete attention. The way he looked at her. Not at the wheelchair, but at her. Wendy felt something stirring inside her. Something she'd thought had died in that accident 3 years ago. Hope, interest, attraction, too soon to name, but it was definitely there. Her first day ended with exhaustion that felt good. Productive, purposeful. Then Lily appeared after school, running to Wendy's desk with her backpack bouncing. "Guess what I learned today?" And Wendy found herself genuinely wanting to know. This was belonging. Not just being an employee, but being part of something, part of a team, part of something that mattered. As Wendy rolled out of the building that evening, past the integrated ramps and the accessible design and the receptionist who waved goodbye by name, she realized her life had shifted. From survival to living. From existing to mattering. And for the first time in 3 years, she couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. 2 months had passed since that snowy birthday evening in the bakery, and Wendy Anderson had become someone she barely recognized. Someone who mattered. She was no longer the consultant in hushed, careful tones. Now it was, "Wendy, what do you think?" In every meeting, her input genuinely sought and valued. Colleagues stopped by her desk with questions about accessibility features, about patient perspective, about whether a new program would actually help or just look good in a press release. She'd formed real relationships, coffee machine conversations that turned into lunch invitations, after-work drinks where people actually wanted her there, not out of obligation but because they enjoyed her company. And then there was Lily. Lily's after-school visits had become as regular as clockwork. She'd burst through the office doors, backpack bouncing, and make a beeline for Wendy's desk. She'd color during meetings, her tongue sticking out in concentration while the adults discussed neural pathways and clinical trials. She'd declared Wendy my best grown-up friend to anyone who would listen. And somehow, through Lily's enthusiastic endorsement, the entire staff had warmed to Wendy in ways that felt organic and real. Everyone knew about Buttercup the pony now. Wendy kept spare coloring books in her desk drawer. This was what family felt like. The family she'd lost beginning to reform itself in unexpected ways. "Lily won't stop asking," Jeffrey had said that afternoon, looking slightly embarrassed. "Would you like to come for dinner?" Now Wendy sat in their kitchen, watching Lily devour pizza while chattering about her day, and felt something in her chest that might have been happiness. The house was beautiful, but lived in, not a showcase, but a home. With Lily's artwork on the fridge and shoes by the door, and the comfortable chaos of actual life. Lily had given her a grand tour earlier. Her room, which was an explosion of pink that made Wendy's eyes hurt in the best way. Buttercup's stable, where the small pony, definitely not a large dog, had nuzzled Wendy's hand. The treehouse that Jeffrey had apparently built himself. And the robot that makes breakfast, which turned out to be an automatic coffee maker that Lily found endlessly fascinating. Photos were everywhere. Sarah's presence honored, not erased. Wendy saw her in Lily's green eyes, in the smile caught in a frame on the mantel, in the way Jeffrey's expression softened when Lily did something that must have reminded him of her mother. They sat around the kitchen table, Lily between them, tomato sauce on her chin, talking with her mouth full about why carrots should be purple and why her teacher was wrong about penguins. It felt domestic, familial, natural, as if they'd done this 100 times before, instead of it being the first. After dinner, Lily hugged Wendy goodnight before bed, her small arms fierce around Wendy's neck. "Will you come back?" "If your dad invites me," Wendy said carefully. "He will," Lily said with 7-year-old certainty. "He likes you." She scampered off, leaving Wendy blushing like a teenager. Alone with Jeffrey in the living room, a fire crackling in the fireplace, Wendy felt the comfortable ease of the evening shift into something more uncertain. "I hope this isn't invasive," Jeffrey began, and Wendy's stomach clenched. "But I've been reading about patient experiences online, trying to understand the community better. And I found your blog." Wendy froze. She'd forgotten about the blog. Posts she'd written in the darkest days after the accident, raw and unfiltered. Her grief and rage and despair poured out for anyone to read. "I hope that's okay," Jeffrey continued quickly. "It's public. I wasn't trying to—" "It's fine," Wendy managed, though her hands were shaking. Jeffrey noticed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up." "No, it's— What did you read?" "Most of it, actually." His voice was gentle. "Your writing is beautiful, painful, but beautiful. The way you describe living with loss, it helped me understand my own grief better." He paused, and Wendy knew something more was coming. "There was a post from 3 years ago, before your accident, about saving a little girl at a crosswalk. The memory surfaced like something from a dream. A rainy day, a child darting into traffic after a ball, red rain boots with yellow ducks, curly brown hair plastered to her face. A unicorn backpack, Wendy grabbing her, pulling her back just as a car sped past. Close enough that Wendy felt the wind of it. The mother screaming
crying, thanking her. Wendy feeling useful, helpful, like she mattered. Writing about it that night because it had felt good to save someone. I remember, Wendy said slowly. Jeffrey's voice was thick with emotion. Wendy, that was Lily. The world tilted sideways. What? I was in the coffee shop across the street. I saw everything. His words came faster now, like he'd been holding them in for too long. I watched you save my daughter. I called out to thank you, but you'd already disappeared into the crowd. I looked for you for weeks. I wanted to thank you properly, but I never found you. And then, he gestured helplessly. Years later, a bakery. Snow, your birthday. You were there, and I didn't recognize you, but Lily, you saved my daughter, he said. And then, years later, you came back into our lives when we needed saving again. Wendy was crying now, unable to process the circular nature of it all. Fate? Coincidence? Destiny? Words that seemed too big and too small at the same time. It has to mean something, Jeffrey said, moving closer. It has to be fate. His intention was clear in his eyes. He was going to kiss her. And Wendy wanted it more than she'd wanted anything in years. But fear won out. I can't, she whispered, pulling back. Jeffrey stopped immediately, but confusion crossed his face. I can't be someone's project. Jeffrey, the words tumbled out in a rush. I can't be the poor disabled girl you save because you feel grateful that I saved Lily. His response was sharp. Stop. Is that really what you think? Her defenses shot up. Isn't it? You hire me after meeting me once. You invite me to your home. Now you're saying it's fate? How is that not you trying to save me? Jeffrey stood, frustrated, pacing across the room. You're not hearing me. He turned back to her, his voice intense. When I look at you, I don't see the wheelchair. I see a woman who survived losses that would break most people. I see someone who still creates beauty from pain. I see someone who makes my daughter laugh, who brought purpose back to my work, who understands grief in a way most people can't. His voice softened. I see someone I'm falling for. Despite every voice in my head telling me it's too soon, too complicated, too risky. Wendy couldn't speak. I know it's only been 2 months, he continued. I know there are 1,000 reasons this doesn't make sense. I'm still in love with my dead wife. You're dealing with your own trauma. We work together. But Wendy, he knelt beside her wheelchair, his eyes level with hers. You fit into our lives like you were always meant to be there. I'm scared, Wendy whispered, the confession tearing out of her. I've lost everyone I've ever loved. My parents, my aunt, my friends, my career, my body. If I let myself love you and Lily, and then I lose you. She couldn't finish the thought. The fear was too big, too consuming. Jeffrey took her hands in his. Then we go slow. No pressure, no expectations. Just see where it goes. He squeezed gently. But don't push me away because you're scared. I'm scared too. Being scared means it matters. Wendy nodded through her tears. He leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. A promise without demand. Hope without pressure. When Wendy left that night, rolling through the snow toward her car, her hand kept touching her forehead where he'd kissed her. They'd agreed to go slow, to see where this led without forcing it. Everything was more complicated now, but also somehow clearer. They'd saved each other once, her pulling Lily from traffic,
them pulling her from isolation. Maybe they could do it again, together. As she drove home through the winter streets, Wendy thought about fate and coincidence and the strange way life could circle back on itself. She thought about fear and risk and the terrifying possibility of letting herself hope for something more than survival. Love, family, future. All of it terrifying. All of it worth risking. For the first time in 3 years, Wendy Anderson let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be happy, and that maybe happiness was actually possible. The next 6 months unfolded like a story Wendy had never dared to write for herself. They dated slowly, carefully, Jeffrey always considering accessibility without making it the focus. Art museums with accessible tours. Movies where he asked her preference for seating. Park picnics where they found spots her wheelchair could navigate easily. Home cooking experiments where they learned together, laughing over burnt vegetables and too much salt mistakes. The disability was present, but not consuming. Natural accommodations woven into the fabric of their relationship like thread through cloth. Visible if you looked, but part of the whole. Lily figured it out first, of course. "Are you and Daddy dating?" she asked that one afternoon, looking up from her coloring with those knowing green eyes. They'd had a careful conversation with her. Yes, they were trying it out. No rush. Her feelings mattered most. "Good," Lily had announced with 7-year-old certainty. "I already picked paint colors for your room. Purple and silver, because those are your colors." Wendy had written about it on her blog, about finding love after loss, about second chances, about being worthy of love despite brokenness. She didn't name Jeffrey, but she wrote honestly about what it felt like to let hope back in after years of keeping it locked out. The post went viral. Suddenly, there were interview requests, talk show invitations, magazine features. The attention was overwhelming, but tucked among the chaos was a book deal offer. A publisher wanted her story, the real story about disability and dignity and love and loss. Jeffrey was proud, never overshadowing her success, supporting without taking over. Meanwhile, company projects were succeeding because of her insights. Programs that actually helped the disabled community instead of just looking good on paper. Accessibility was becoming standard, not an afterthought. Wendy spoke at medical conferences, becoming a voice for those who'd been voiceless for too long. Her confidence grew, not despite her disability, but as a complete person who happened to use a wheelchair. 6 months after that snowy evening in the bakery, Wendy attended Lily's spring concert. She sat in the audience wondering what she was exactly. Girlfriend? Family friend? Something in between? Lily performed in the spring pageant, singing enthusiastically and entirely off-key, pointing Wendy out to her friends. "That's Wendy! She's my piano teacher!" Wendy had started giving Lily lessons, and the girl had thrown herself into music with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything. After the concert, in the parking lot, Lily ran ahead to the car with a cluster of friends. Jeffrey and Wendy had a moment alone. Snow was falling, a late spring snow, gentle and melting almost as soon as it touched the ground. A callback to that first night, but softer somehow, less desperate. Jeffrey stopped walking. "I need to tell you something." Wendy's heart raced. "I love you." The words came out in a rush. "I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated. But Wendy, I love you." Her response caught in her throat, tangled up with all her fear and all her hope. "I love you too," she whispered, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. His kiss was gentle but certain. like she was precious, like she was whole, like the wheelchair didn't exist, not because he ignored it, but because it was just one part of her, not the sum total of who she was. It was the first kiss that made her feel truly seen, not despite anything, but because of everything. A full year after that birthday in the bakery, they had dinner at home, their place now, practically speaking. Wendy had a key. She kept clothes in the closet. Her apartment felt like a past life, a place she visited occasionally but no longer truly lived. Lily giggled all through dinner, clearly in on some secret. After they'd cleared the plates, Jeffrey took a breath. "Wendy, I have something to ask." He dropped to one knee beside her wheelchair. Lily bounced with barely contained excitement. "You saved my daughter twice," Jeffrey said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Once from a car. Once from grief that was consuming us both. You brought music and light back into our lives." He opened a small box. Simple, elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Wendy couldn't speak through the tears, could only nod frantically, pulling him up for a kiss while Lily danced around them shouting, "I knew it! I knew it!" The ring fit perfectly. Lily had helped him guess the size. 3 of them together. Past grief not erased, but future possible. Family forming, not a replacement, but an evolution. Love built on loss, stronger for having survived. They married in June in the backyard. Small, intimate, perfect. Jeffrey carried Wendy down the aisle, not because she needed carrying, but because he wanted to, and because she'd chosen to let him. Lily served as maid of honor and promptly dropped the ring, having to crawl under chairs to find it, while everyone laughed. Perfectly imperfect. Their vows spoke of saving each other, of second chances, of building family from grief, of love that included all of you, the broken parts and the healing parts, and everything in between. The bakery clerk was there, giving a toast that made everyone cry. $2 for a birthday cake led to this. Never underestimate the power of kindness. At the reception, Jeffrey spun Wendy's wheelchair in time to the music. Not the dancing she'd once known, but dancing nonetheless. Movement and music and joy. Sarah's photo was honored at the ceremony, not erased, but integrated. It had been Lily's idea. "Mommy would want us happy," she'd said with simple wisdom. They opened Keys to Hope, a piano school for disabled children. Wendy taught not just piano, but possibility, showing kids that disability didn't mean the end of dreams. Her book was published and became a bestseller, not inspiration porn, but an honest story of survival. She dedicated it to Margaret, who taught her to fight, to Lily, who taught her to hope, and to Jeffrey, who taught her to love again. The book signing was held at the bakery where it all began. Full circle. A crowd gathered, press present, but Wendy's focus was on the baker who'd witnessed that first meeting, on the small table where they'd shared cake, on the window where snow had fallen. "This story started with a birthday wish," she told the crowd. "I wished for something small, just to matter for one day, to someone. What I got was a reminder. We all matter, every day, to someone." Lily, now 8, stood in the audience and announced their family tradition. Every year on Wendy's birthday, they bought cake for someone who needed it. Last year, an elderly man counting pennies. This year, a teenage mother sitting alone. They never explained why, just said, birthdays should be celebrated. The tradition spread. The bakery started a Pay It Forward fund. Hundreds of cakes were given away annually. each one potentially changing a life. The way Wendy's had been changed. One moment of kindness leading to a movement. One cake leading to countless others. Years later, on Wendy's 30th birthday, she sat at the piano in their living room. Not the dancing she'd once dreamed of, but music still flowed through her. Different expression, same soul. Jeffrey worked at his desk nearby. His company now led the field in accessibility research because of the insights she'd provided. Lily, now 13, painted in the corner, already talking about medical school, already volunteering at Keys to Hope. Outside, snow began to fall. 6 years since that bakery night. Wendy paused, looking at her family, remembering the girl with $2 who thought it wasn't enough. Understanding now, it was exactly enough for everything that mattered. Not the money, the moment, not the cake, the connection. Not the rescue, the recognition. She returned to the piano, playing Beethoven's Ode to Joy. Fitting. Joy built on sorrow. Hope built on loss. Family built on a chance encounter. Life built from $2 and snow. The music filled their home. Jeffrey looked up, smiling at her with that look that still made her heart skip after 6 years. Lily glanced over from her painting. "What are you thinking about?" Lily asked. "Just remembering my 24th birthday," Wendy said. "The best birthday ever," Lily proclaimed. "The best birthday," Wendy agreed. She returned to the music, her fingers dancing across the keys. From $2 and isolation to love and legacy. Not despite her wheelchair, but as a complete person who'd survived, who'd thrived, who'd saved others by letting herself be saved. By accepting that mattering didn't require walking, just required being seen. And she was seen, every day, by the people who mattered most. The snow fell softly outside. The music played inside. And Wendy Anderson, dancer, advocate, teacher, wife, mother figure, survivor, smiled and played on, her life a testament to the simple truth that sometimes the smallest moments hold the greatest transformations. Sometimes $2 is exactly enough. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.